All right, let's move on to Elon's CNBC interview. Specifically, I'd like to talk about just the slapback he did on free speech, and then maybe even talk about his work from home uh, ideology. I guess saying that's morally wrong. Um, so I guess I'll do this. I'll talk about the work from home piece. Uh, he did mention on that it actually is a moral issue, and so I even though I'm an Elon fanboy, everybody who knows me knows that I'm he can do no wrong in my eyes. However, that's not entirely true. I I really am kind of wondering. I currently work in a job where I can be remote 24/7, and I appreciate that fact. And I can also appreciate that there's still jobs out there where people need to go in, and that's how their value is created, by actually being in that specific place to do the specific thing. And so I think it really, for me, it's like how a business should be focused on the value it creates, as opposed to creating structures to force everybody into the same funnel, despite the value it creates. And for me, I, if you were to run an analytic on my performance over the past 2 years from working from home, it it just would be a no brainer of, like, one, my quality of life has changed significantly by just being able to get out of bed, see my daughter, and then I can come back to work. And once a meeting ends, I can go see her. If my wife needs help, I can just go help her, and I can still deliver the same output, if not more, by doing that, because you're eliminating my drive time, the stress of all of that, just trying to get to work on time, and then obviously a safety, removing all of that concern from my life to actually get to the job. Um, and then sometimes I'd have to leave early in order to get to a certain appointment or whatever, because I'm no longer close to my home. Um, and so, yeah, it just, to me, I don't know how much it is necessarily a moral issue. I get the team culture, like, if you remove people, then it automatically disassociates you in some way from the team. But just even in my environment today, half my team is fully remote. So even if I came into an office, it doesn't, it still would not make sense, because I'm still getting on a virtual call in order to talk to people. So I don't know, Dane. What do you think?
Two sides to, I mean, so I've been working remote pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic. Part of it was because we were all forced to work from home, and then I needed to relocate, and most of my team just happens to be based in a different country. So I I get that, you know, having worked remotely for a long time, I know that I can be productive. And I think that for some jobs it makes sense, for some jobs it's more feasible, and for others it's not. I can also I can also see where Elon is coming from. I mean, I think it's important for people that don't know the backstory. Uh, Tesla is, very successful today, and they're printing billions of dollars, but it hasn't always been that way. And Elon was the guy that was, when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy multiple times, literally sleeping on the factory floor, trying to get them through production hell, and financing crises and things like that. So I think I can sympathize with where he's coming from, in the sense that, you know, it would be morally wrong for Elon as the chief executive to be working from home when he runs a manufacturing company that could very well go bankrupt because of not being able to successfully ramp up production.
Yeah.
So I can see where he's coming from uh, in that regard, but I don't think it applies to every industry. I don't think it applies to every job. I think that some people can actually be a lot more productive working from home than they can than they can by going into the office. It really depends on what the job is. Now, do I prefer working from home or do I prefer working in person? Personally, like honestly, I would 10 out of 10 be in person. Um, you know, every day if I could, if my team was close to me. I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I think that there's something that you miss when you're fully remote, from a social aspect, but then also just from an impact standpoint. I think it, especially if you were working in an organization that was like heavily centered around the product and making the product better. Obviously, it makes sense to be in that kind of field.
Mhm.
If you're a product manager or an engineer, working on physical things, it makes a lot more sense to, I can see how you would be more productive, being in that environment and actually have a better impact on the company by you being there in person.
Mhm.
But like I said, it depends. It's not a one size fits all. In some areas it makes sense, in some areas it doesn't. And so, do I think that it's morally wrong? No, not necessarily. A lot of it comes down to context.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm always just wanting to think forward, and it feels like if today you were to have all companies go back into the office with technology that COVID thrust forward, with online work, it just seems to me a huge step back, especially with all this push to be net zero. Like companies are talking about going net zero on things, yet they're going to still force their people to get in their internal combustion engine cars to spend the gas to get to the job. It just doesn't. It seems like just does not make sense, and it seems like a huge time sink for most jobs. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, are we just kind of in that half step as we continue to move forward with robots actually doing the mundane tasks or just even the regular tasks that humans do? Uh, could we not get to a place where even those on-site jobs are remotely managed by a person embodying a robot for the day?
Mhm.
Um, it seems like that would. So I guess in the current state, I can see where Elon's consternation is with trying to get people in. But it seems like in the very near future, all the people that you're needing to actually come in to get the job done, you could actually just have them stay at home, and actually
Mhm.
probably be even more effective at that job, because then they could even like imagine just being able to port yourself over to different robots across the work landscape, and you could,
Mhm.
now you're not just stuck in your own little body to have to maneuver everywhere. You could actually port your intelligence just all around to these different robots.
Mhm. So essentially having like a digital twin of the real world and porting yourself
Yeah.
into like actually seeing the virtualized version of what is actually happening in the physical world. Interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a technological standpoint, we're getting there. Uh, to be seen or to be determined how similar that experience is, of like doing something virtually versus actually doing something in person, being able to, like see, like the virtual things will get to a point where they're almost indistinguishable from reality. So maybe the vision part of it is different, but then there's smell, there's picking up on things like body language. I think it'll be incredibly difficult to completely mimic that. I think that there will always be something that you get from the physical experience that you cannot replicate in the virtual experience. I think we'll get really close, but yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the AI discussion. Like how will you know if an agent, if an artificial intelligence agent is actually capable of things like empathy? Like what are those human things that cannot be replicated by machines. I think there's a parallel to be drawn between that and experiencing things virtually versus physically as well.
Yeah, but I guess maybe then could you separate the work versus the culture? Because right now we're trying to integrate culture into the work, but what if you had an environment where you're getting the work done in a robotic in a robot, and then outside of that, teams are coming together and meeting together, in that's outside the context of actually getting the work done, and you're still
Hmm.
creating the togetherness. You're cultivating that. It's just not in tandem with getting the job done. I don't
Hmm.
know, and maybe you're saying
Yeah,
there's you can still miss something there, but
yeah.
yeah,
Well, think about it. Think about it like this, right? Take a company like Apple. Apple, for example. Picture yourself. You're a part of the Apple product development team, and one of the things that Apple prides himself on is the packaging that their goods come in. They've spent a lot of time focusing on like the process of opening up packaging, how it feels, the textures of the different materials, how they all work together to create this like unboxing experience that when you're unboxing it, you're like, wow, man, this is cool. Like this
yeah,
is an
yeah,
Apple product. I think that some things like that, like I said, that are more closer to the actual physical product, in those scenarios, it makes more sense to be in person, to be working in person. It doesn't make sense for the person leading that development to just be like sitting behind their laptop, like sending instructions to a team that's actually going to be doing the work. And I think that is what Elon is getting at in this terms of morality. Um, it's like executives or like people trying to sit on their moral high horse and saying someone else must go and do that, like I'm above that, but instead, like, versus actually like being there in person and doing this stuff for yourself. And I think that's where he's coming from, because he is a very hands-on CEO that does work the factory floor. His desk and all of his meetings are like held in this place where you can oversee the entire Austin production line in Austin. So that's just the kind of CEO that he is. And obviously, he works in an environment where the physical product is everything. The manufacturing process, the manufacturing process, like it's the machine that builds the machine, is as much of a product as the products that they build.
mm,
So I can see where he's coming from in his, and I think that it would be I can see where he's coming from in the sense of in the morality point, um, but I don't think that it applies to everything equally, if that
mm,
makes sense.
yeah. Fair point. I don't want to tangent too far, but I
Go
guess
for it.
if you can if you can mimic reality to an extent, like you're talking about the touching and the feeling of and smelling of the thing, if we were to actually achieve that, would that then be convincing enough to be like, because I think of even what MKHB
MKBHD.
KBH, yeah,
Marquez.
yes, Marquez.
Legend.
Sorry, I butchered the acronym. But he did a Google exclusive with one of their Starlight, I think it is. And I, for me, it looked like really gimmicky at first, but then actually seeing Marquez's um, demo of it, I was like,
Hmm.
whoa, okay, I see that in a whole new way of like literally feeling like I'm in that room with that person. I'm not needing all this hardware. I'm in it. And like if I was to surround myself with my team in that way, where we're able to show product and stuff like that, but then going even one step further, where maybe you do have like uh, some haptic gloves where you can actually reach out, touch the object. What does that feel
Hmm.
like? I've even heard of some tech where you can touch something and you can actually feel the texture difference between touching marble and touching wood.
Hmm.
That's totally virtual. So
Yeah.
if yeah, I don't know. If you can bridge the divide in a digital sense like that, does that does that then solve that problem? I,
Yeah. I think technologically we're still some ways away from that. So that demo is we'll put a maybe a
Yeah.
link to the video down below so people can go and check it out. It's really cool, but it's like it's me as a person talking to one other person on a screen. You've got like a bunch of these different cameras and lidar sensors and everything to map the 3D environment. It looks super realistic. But think about like if you had a meeting with multiple people and you were sitting at a conference table, for example, I don't think that you would get the same experience from having each person beamed in on one of those because you're still looking at a screen, and even though the person in the screen like looks 3D and looks super realistic, it's still not going to be the same experience because you're still going to see these box frames around them. So until it's like unless you have like literally a hologram technology where there's no screens around it, it's just there's a table, there's seats, and maybe you have a pair of AR glasses on or something like that that creates this digital version of a person. And if you reach out, you've got maybe some haptic gloves on, you reach out, high five them, and you can feel that sensation. I mean, maybe you'll replicate some sense of that, but it just seems like super over engineered, doesn't it? Like every time you have to, if you want to have one of those meetings and stuff to get the real in-person experience, you have to have like all of this like really expensive technology versus you could have actually just flown those people in for the same prices.
I
Oh, okay.
mean,
I guess the cost of the equipment gets amortized over the number of uses versus flying in and out is like that's a continual expense every time. But do you see what I'm saying? Like in a sense that is it worth like is it worth developing that? And maybe there's just going to be cases where that does find its product market fit, but will not necessarily be applicable to every scenario.
I I think right now what we think is an over engineering, like, and because you're right, like if we had to look at our current tech today, that to engineer something that mimics reality just seems like, man, you gotta cobble together all this different tech to actually make this happen. I just think that's just I don't know. It's not. It seems like a lot of work right now. But
Hmm.
just if we look at the progression of tech, things that seem totally impossible and impractical, uh, even 20 years ago, we're looking at and we're like, oh, that's all in my pocket now. And so I don't know. I think you're right. The form factor, the ability to just literally pop on some glasses, and that should be the effort required.
Hmm.
But I think even now, if you were to give me five different like instruments to be able to put on and say, now I'm in that virtual environment, I would still much rather probably do that than do the hour drive to work and back home every single day.
Hmm.
And then even thinking of the additional value add of now everything's digitalized with that new solution. It,
Hmm.
it it would solve the problem of still of what I've argued is the object permanence problem, especially for companies that are global and not just in one spot. Um, you you go to an office because you think you solved the object permanence problem, which is you have something in your face, and then you have something revealed, and you know where it is in the world now. So you go to an office, and you're like, well, I know where sales sits, I know where marketing sits, so I can just go up and talk to them. But I with a global company or just even multi location company, you can you can't solve that even in a physical environment. You can only solve that in a digital one. Um, and we still struggle with that because we talk on 2D screens all day long. We still have that object permanence that we deal with, but uh, I just think if you can fully digitalize and you can mimic reality in that way, I think you then can um, you can deliver more value than forcing people into an office. We totally went on a tangent. Uh,
Total tangent.
so
Future of work.
future work. So
Future work.
yeah, maybe
It'll be
maybe
interesting.
something to dive in further on a different day. But yeah,
Yeah. And there's a lot that we can explore in that regard as well. I know Zoom is obviously dependent on remote work continuing to be a thing, and they're trying to do things to make that experience feel more connected. But I think that the amount of effort that they're putting into replicating the in-person experience, trying to synthesize that, it just shows it's validation of why being face to face and seeing people and being able to shake someone's hand or see their nonverbal communication and things like that. It's validation of why all of those things are important for us as humans, for us as social beings. Do you need to be, does everyone need to be working in person in order to be able to do their jobs? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that there's plenty of scenarios where working remote does make sense, especially if you're working on a completely software-based product. Um, you can do everything that you need to do from your computer.
Hmm.
Um, and so from a productivity standpoint, I think it just depends. Um, I don't think that it can be said one way or another that it's 100% morally wrong, 100% not morally wrong, because it's so situational. Anyway, alas.
Yes. W Clearly, we have more to unpack on this topic,
Yeah.
so we'll definitely do that more. But agreed. Currently, a moral issue till we create an environment where it is equal among everybody. Uh, and like you said, it's not a one size fits all
Hmm.
when it comes to it being a moral issue for companies. So
Hmm.
awesome.